Welcome back to Calvary Life. This is the podcast of Calvary Baptist Church. I'm Charles Uptain, Executive Pastor.
I'm Melody Uptain.
I'm Josh Robertson.
I'm John Adams Uptain.
And we are all here today to talk about our Kenya mission trip. So we've kind of had a little bit of a few weeks off for the summer. And so we're back today to just kind of give a recap of the trip. So I invited some of my family along because the three of us went to Kenya, got back this past Monday. And then, actually 2 Mondays now ago, isn't it? Yes, it's going fast. And then Josh, of course, his second time as well to Kenya. So I just wanted to talk about the trip and the exciting things we saw and what we were able to do. And so we'll just kind of go around and I'll ask some questions and see where it takes us. So it was just a great trip. I'm so thankful our church is involved in missions the way we are, the way that we sponsor missions, from our money to our time to prayer. And we felt that. We saw God working there. So just really exciting trip. So just to start off, everybody just kind of tell what ministry area you worked on. I'd say we really have three main things that we do. We did this time in Kenya. We had a church leadership training, which was kind of like it could be pastors, but also it could be like treasurers. It could be deacons. Those kind of folks were doing training in the mornings. Of course, we had widow leadership training. So we had there's 5,000 or so widows that Echoes of Mercy works with, and so there was the leadership of those widow groups were there, and so they had some teaching, and then of course we did some Vacation Bible School stuff with the school kids and with the orphans there. So just talk about what you did, and we'll start with Melody. Just tell us what you did on the trip.
So I worked with the widows leadership. We taught. I and 3 other ladies taught them about Bible intake and fruits of the Spirit.
So how many women do you think were there?
There was probably 300.
Yeah, 350, something like that. When they're all there together, when we met in the mornings, I think it was close to 400, and then we kind of split up the 2 different directions. So Josh, what about you?
So the first day that we were there, I got to work with the Vacation Bible School, so kind of headed up games for that. And then the second day there, I got to actually lead a session with the church leaders in the book of First Timothy. So that was an awesome experience to be able to do that.
Yeah, and there's probably maybe 60 or so is what I was thinking in that room
I think
we were in.
That's a good estimate.
Yeah. And John Adams?
Yeah, I got the opportunity to do the opposite of Josh. So where Josh went, I went the other direction. So I started on Friday with the leadership conference coming out of 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy. And on Saturday, getting to work with doing games with the kids at Vacation Bible School.
Yeah. So and I stayed with the church leaders conference both mornings, and then in the afternoon. Though the first day we had the kids in the afternoon as well, and I helped with the VBS portion of that. So that's kind of what I did as well from the ministry side. Now, when we talk about the trip, it seems like you're talking about day 1 and day 2, and that's it. And really and truly, we were gone for, I guess, 7 days, but really, on the ground, seeing the ministry, working with it, it was, I guess, 4 of those days. So the first day we kind of, time we got to Echoes of Mercy, it was kind of like, okay, take the morning to catch your breath. And then we after lunch, went around to some places, saw some of the well drilling sites and some of the other things that y'all had seen before.
Right.
I guess Josh and Melody went last year. Me and John Adams were new. So just talk a little bit about what you saw different this year, maybe compared to what you saw last year. Either one of you on that as your second trip.
Yeah, I think last year when we went, we saw a lot of projects that were near completion, but still had a long way to go.
Yeah.
We saw the girls' dormitory. When you went inside, it was completely unfinished on the inside. There was no furniture. It was just rooms, no electricity, nothing like that. It was completely finished, and kids were living in it this year. The children's home was very similar. The structure was there. The outside was complete, but the inside still had a long way to go. Mm-hmm. None of the finishing touches were done. There was really a lot still to be done. And you wondered, can you get this done in a year? And then we were fortunate to be there as that home was open to those orphans for the first time.
Right.
So I think that was one of the big things. Is last year we saw a lot of things that were started. This year you got to see them completed, which was a direct correlation to the power of prayer, um, just the faithfulness of people in giving to those ministries. So you got to see what the gifts and what the prayer was able to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Melody?
So the biggest difference that I saw, which I would echo everything that Josh just said about completion of things, but seeing, I don't want to get emotional, but I'm going to.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. Started early.
We met, I guess, about 16 orphans last year before the orphanage was open, and that had been vetted. There's 86 now. But we got to meet those first 16, and we all had one that we prayed for. So there were 16 of us and 16 of them. And so going back and seeing those kids, and we could not get them to smile last year. We could not get them to carry on conversation with us. But this year, they were absolutely just full of joy.
One thing I thought was interesting with that is we couldn't tell the difference. You know, there's other kids. Obviously, Echoes of Mercy School has, I guess I've heard 350 something like that of students. Of course, we didn't get to see all those because they had a couple of days off of school, and so the Friday not everybody was there. But still, there were more than just the orphans there. And of course, they still have some boarding also of kids who stay there and in the dormitories. But you couldn't tell the difference. That's what from perspective of those who had been before. That's kind of what you're looking for this child that you saw a year back, and it was like you couldn't tell the difference in them compared to the ones who had been there. So I think that just really speaks to the ministry of Echoes of Mercy. You know, that number one, every child matters to them. Every child is valued, and they want all those children to be at the same spot. You know, they want to teach them and train them and nurture them, give them everything they need so they can all be, have the same opportunity. And that's kind of what I saw in it.
Yeah, and I think one of the other projects, which we got there at night, so we probably didn't get to see kind of what we would have saw last year, but with the hostel that Betty's working on, as a way to kind of provide some financial independence for Echoes of Mercy last year, it was tree scaffolding all the way through, nothing but brick structure. And then we go there this year, and there are 18 completed rooms.
Yeah.
And every one of them was full.
Yeah. They've got students that are renting from Echoes of Mercy, and just a great way that they're trying to be creative to find ways to fund ministry for the widows mainly is what that's for. So that's a great thing. So John Adams, for me and you, being brand new this year, what do you think really stuck out to you as something that maybe surprised you, what you thought? You've heard from your mom, heard from other people who've been the trip, heard from McKenna on the trip. So what though still surprised you when you went?
I think the biggest thing that surprised me on the trip was the scale of impact that Echoes of Mercy has within their community. So, going and first hearing about the trip and hearing about Echoes of Mercy, seeing Moses's promotion video that he made years ago about all the different things that they have going on, like that, that they are involved in a lot of different things. But I didn't think that I actually realized how many people they were impacting with those things that they're involved in. Like, for example, a brand new well that they've just drilled that was starting while y'all were there last year. Moses is telling us that well will be one of the only freshwater sources for 30,000 people.
Yeah.
Like, that's a massive scale of impact that they have just from that one thing. And they're involved in so many different things, like we've said, with the school, the orphanage, with the widows ministry, all across the country. Like, I just think how big of an impact they're having in Kenya was really surprising and amazing to me.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe if I say one thing that really, I guess, surprised me, I don't know what I was expecting, but man, the roads in Kenya are terrible.
They are.
That is fair.
Man, when you
really,
think
that's
about
the thing.
well, I mean, I could talk about all the other things, but I guess I I kind of expected what we saw and other things. I've had a lot of conversations, a lot of conversations, but just getting from point A to point B, man, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going. We figured out what was it, 30 miles was what we had to travel back to the airport, and it took 2 hours to get there,
2 hours.
and about an hour and a half to get back, and then trying to go to that hostel, 30-minute trip took 2 hours, and it's crazy to think. I guess the point to that for me is Kenya is a country that just really struggles with infrastructure.
Mhm.
They struggle with those things that we take so much for granted here. We take for granted that we turn on our water and water comes out. We take for granted that we can go 200 miles in 3 hours. I mean, literally 200 miles in 3 hours to go to Birmingham and back. Those kind of places, because of our road system, we take for granted. Josh, this education.
Yeah.
I mean, every child is afforded that here. Not only afforded it, law, they have to go to school,
Smart.
You have to get it.
and so just so much difference in that. But because of that, I think you're right, John Adams, that in Kenya so much can make, or a little can make a lot of difference because of the needs that are there. So I would agree with that. So let me ask you another question. Thinking about coming off the trip, we'll go back to some of the specifics, but coming off of it, what have you found yourself thinking about or praying about since you came off the trip this time? Anything just really stick with you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been the people. You've now, I've had the opportunity to go twice. So those relationships that were formed the first time, you leave now and they're only strengthened. Those people mean more to you now than they did even the first time you met them. I can tell you about their families. I can tell you about their kids. I can tell you about some of their struggles. So for me, it's really lifting up those leaders in prayer. David, Betty, Ezron, Emily, just a continual prayer for them, for strength, for focus, for clarity, for direction has really been the focus of my prayer for Kenya as I've come back.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think for me, the big kind of thing that I've been thinking about, I already mentioned the well with 30,000 people and thinking about water specifically. Like, as you said, Dad, talking about how water is one of those things that we take for such granted, like turn on the tap and there it is, and it's good and ready to be. You can drink it right then. You don't have to do anything to it to fix it. But I think just whenever we went to where that well had been drilled, we had the opportunity to see a standard well, like a bucket
Hole in the ground.
hole in the ground
Yeah.
with a bucket
tin,
and
yeah.
a piece of tin covering it. You put a bucket on a rope and drop it down. And just hearing Moses describe, that, in that water source, you have animals that'll fall into it and die and, pollute the water. You'll have people that'll come and use the restroom in it whenever they're, drunk or anything else like that. And just that is what those people all across the country are having to use for their drinking water. And in my mind, Dad, I haven't been able to stop talking about water since we got back.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the massive impact that just clean drinking water can have on people and their ability to be able to flourish, So I've just been thinking about that a lot and thinking about, how can we help here with funding that, with raising money to help their cause of drilling wells all across that village, across the area, and across the country. That's been something I've been thinking about and praying about a lot.
Yeah. Anything to add?
I totally agree with what Josh said as far as praying for the leaders. That's been what's been on my heart since we got back, is just how much they are doing and the impact they're making, but just constantly in prayer for their discernment and their wisdom to know what to do, because the needs are great and the needs are endless. And just knowing what they need to do, what's going to have the most impact for the gospel, because that's the ultimate reason they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Also, when we think about Calvary, when I think about this partnership that's kind of grown, in 2019, if our listeners don't know, 2019, Stacy Harrison and Paul, our pastor, went on a kind of like a vision trip to Kenya. And so that's when they kind of got to see it firsthand. And, Stacy can tell you the differences now. They're even greater than what you have experienced after 1 year, 5 years. But really and truly, then of course we had 2020 when COVID came, and it kind of slowed our process of going back to Kenya down. We didn't make the trip in the summer of 2020, and then finally have started back a couple of trips. And so I would think this last trip, not our trip, but the trip before, where y'all went first time, and also the missions conference that we did, where Moses was here, and really our focus of that missions conference was about gospel feet. It was the scripture we chose, and then we chose to really make it the prayer and the hope of us to raise money to send shoes for the widows, which we did for your first trip. And then that, I think, was kind of like the ignition to really us getting involved and doing more. You came back, both of you came back, and the team came back with just saying, hey, we gotta help where we can. We need to pray about as a church. How can we give? How can we support them in ways? And our church stepped up. I mean, we have to admit, more than I ever thought we would be able to give towards getting the orphanage finished, and other things. And so, Josh, I want to speak specifically to you as you went last year. And one of our questions on here is really about something that really hits your heart hard, and you worked hard on. So just talk about where that came from last year for you for the science lab, and then what you saw happen in it in the last year.
Yeah. I think last year, the first day the first morning when we woke up, we got to do the assembly with the students, which if anybody can leave that with a dry eye, there's a special place for them or pedestal for them. I've been twice and haven't been able to leave dry-eyed yet. But after that, we began to tour the school, and I remember walking by where they fix food. And I'm thinking to the quality of things that we have here, where they're open fire cooking for 400 students out of a big pot. And then we begin to hit the classrooms, and you see their wooden one-piece desks that they put together, that are a place to sit and a place to write. And then we go into David's office, and he begins to just kind of explain some of the needs. And I remember kind of the amount that he basically threw out there was for $10,000, we can have a complete science lab. And I'm thinking, in America, I wouldn't even have to take that amount before our Board of Education to get it approved to purchase everything that you would need for this. And so I kind of, and as a former science teacher, that kind of hit me. And so we decided to come back, and I kind of started just an online donation campaign for that science lab. I think through that campaign, we were able to raise a little over $2,000. And then, unbeknownst to me, until we go back this time, there were additional donations made to the church through people that I don't know who they were or anything like that. And I think so total, we were able to basically donate to them half of the needed cost to complete that. And so walking into that room this year and being able to see the Bunsen burners, to be able to see the lab stations, to be able to see the microscopes, to be able to see the students using the tools and being able to explain what it is that they were doing. I think I would have just interrupted and sat at that table and just said, you guys tell me everything.
Yeah.
I had a total nerd moment there. But it was just really awesome because it was able to see, just the one conversation that was had in David's office, coming back and telling the story, sharing what you saw, sharing the need, how it could lead to, and it's not done, but it's usable, something that they can use and see value in.
Yeah. And so that, it was so cool just to see those students and those students really taking ownership of it. I felt like we walked into their lab. Did you feel that way?
Absolutely.
Totally.
It was so cool. So that was a great experience. But so another thing, speaking of, if we try to, I guess, boil down the trip to one specific event, I think most of us would point to the opening of the children's home. So I want to talk about that for a minute, because I don't think we expected that. Did y'all expect that we were going to be the ones at that moment?
No.
No.
Not at all.
We'd seen pictures of the outside, and so I think going there, my assumption was, these kids are already living.
Yeah.
They're already living in
Totally.
here. They've
Well,
seen
especially
all
when we
this.
got there the first night and they let us down there and they're singing and dancing, and I thought they were staying there when we got there.
Right. Yeah, that's the same thought I had. So I was very surprised to find out. I guess we found out that day that we were going to be some kind of program or whatever to basically open the home, and then to say, okay, this is what we're here for. This is one of the reasons that we're here for this trip is Moses wants us to be the ones who see this. Which what an awesome experience for us and for our church. I hope the 12 of us as Calvary members can, we were the extension of the church family to see that. And Moses did a great job, I think, of laying out that, Calvary's not the reason that was there. God's the reason that's there.
Right.
But he used us to kind of finish it. It was way along the way. Like y'all said, I mean, when you went last year, there was a building there. It just wasn't complete. It wasn't ready. And so through our fundraising, our putting out the word, people's hearts being open to orphans, the ministry to orphans, then we got to see it completed. But at that moment, of course, I was on the girls' side first, and so they asked me and Moses to cut that ribbon, and we did, and we walk in, and I'm trying to video because I just want to get the picture of the girls coming in the room, and the first 5 or 6 walk in, and about the 7th one walks in and starts jumping up and down, and then all of a sudden, it's a holy party breaks out,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so awesome. So what were y'all thinking? Y'all were outside, I guess, at that point. Was it loud? I mean, could you hear people?
I came running in right behind all the girls, so I got a similar experience to what you did. But I was sobbing, so I don't really. I watched my video back, and I'm like, you can't really tell what's going on because I'm jumping up and down with them. But yeah, it was loud for sure.
Yeah, those with nothing in that room, man. It echoed.
Lots
what was
of hard
in there,
surfaces.
So just lots of kids screaming. So
Yeah. I mean, so for the girls one, I stayed outside and was videoing all of them going in. And, like you said, you could hear them yelling and everything. And it was really loud. And I heard that and I was like, I'm going in when the boys go in. That was my thought. It was like, I want to be in the room seeing the boys when they go in. So, you did the girls first. And then I think, who was it? It was Betty and Stacy were the ones who cut the rope for the boys. So the boys are like, they're dancing and literally marching up to the thing before they go in. And whenever they ran in, they're immediately like, hey, just going crazy. And it was really awesome. And just seeing like the look on their faces because, in my mind, when I think of like an orphanage, especially in a third world country, you're not thinking like a high quality kind of place at all. But the facility that those orphans are moving into is absolutely top notch in every way that it could be. In a lot of ways, it was nicer than the accommodations that we had while we were there. So being able to see them moving into this place, when you're looking at tin shacks and everything else everywhere else you drive, being able to see them run into that place and the pure, as we said, joy that was on their faces as they were partying and everything else, and just being excited to be there and just having pure just happiness just coming out of everybody. It was like impossible to stop smiling while you were there. Yeah. But I just remember in that moment, kind of all the Calvary people, especially, everybody had their phones out when we went in, and then about halfway, everybody put their phone up, and I think just everybody's just taking it in because it was a really powerful moment, I think. So.
Well, and at that time, they hadn't even seen the whole thing. They had walked into one part of it, and they had not seen that they had bathrooms that they were going to be able to use. They've been having to go outside to go to the bathroom, and the balcony, and being able to see so much of their village right in front of them from the balconies, and a yard. I mean, they got a bigger yard than our kids have.
Yeah, and playing on that grass was pretty fun. Playing soccer.
That was very fun.
That was cool. So what did you think, Josh?
I think, I didn't actually go in at either time. So, just kind of, it's almost like my focus in that moment was I want to stand back and just take as much of this in as you can, because, so I think God blesses us with pictures of what eternity will look like. Mm-hmm. We're blessed to see some of those. And I think, and you think of, you hear all of the time when one soul comes to saving knowledge of Christ and the sacrifice that he made, that there is a party, going on in heaven. And you can only, I think kind of this side of heaven, there are only a few glimpses of that we get, but just that pure joy and excitement of those children as they walked in, I couldn't help but think it's like this, but 100 times better when just one person,
Mhm.
comes to a saving knowledge. So I think that was kind of, for me, it was just take it in and soak it up and just enjoy their enjoyment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was huge.
Yeah. One other thing I thought that was interesting was that the widows, leadership of the widows who were there had come down, and they were kind of like standing around on the grass, and they were excited for the kids too, and that meant something to me to see those ladies who, most of them have had a hard life. They've had tragedy. They're all widows. They've had tragedy in their life, but they are able to see this good blessing of God towards these orphans as a good thing. It didn't seem to be anybody was jealous of those orphans, or they were just excited that those kids were now going to have a home.
Mhm.
And it was just, that's love. I mean, that's what love should be. It's not jealousy. It's just excitement of the blessing that God's given somebody else.
And I think there was at one point Moses actually commended the widow leadership because they had reached out
Yeah.
to some of them and asked them to identify children that they knew were
Right.
in struggling situations or children that couldn't take care of themselves, and there was no one else that could take care of them. So a lot of those children in some shape, form, or fashion were connected
Right.
Yeah.
to that widow leadership that was there. And
Yeah.
so I think that was pretty awesome as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, our time is getting short. I do want to ask one more question because, we as a team met that last night. We really talked about how we want to increase the number of people who are on these trips, and especially on the Kenya trip, as we look forward to next year doing another large widows conference like y'all did last year, which will need a big team, a team of 16, 20 people on it. And so let's talk about the travel a little bit, because I know maybe this is my surprise of the trip is, when you start thinking about the travel to get there, it can kind of be daunting. But what are your thoughts about that travel? From Dothan, so to speak, all the way to the other side of Kisumu, Kenya.
Well, took 2 days to get there. But with that, it really wasn't, the getting there really wasn't that hard in my mind. Like that, basically the way that we did it was 2 8-hour flights back to back from Atlanta to Paris to Nairobi, Kenya. And then we stayed in Nairobi that night and then got up and had a 25-minute flight to Kisumu from Nairobi. So the travel, the way it's broken down, I really didn't think was that difficult on the way there. On the way back, you're tired, you're exhausted. So trying to sleep on some of those red eyes is difficult and those things. But as far as the getting there, I didn't really think it was too terrible compared to, like our team or our group that's in Israel right now. That flight to Tel Aviv is miserable.
Yeah.
That is an awful flight because it's almost 12 hours and, that's just not fun. 8 hours is kind of that sweet spot where you do get a break in between. You can stretch your legs for a minute before getting back and going again.
Yeah. What'd y'all think about it?
I would say it's not for the faint of heart. I'm a hot-natured person, so when you put me on those airplanes, and on the bigger airplanes, you don't have control of the airflow. It gets real. So I think I felt bad for everybody sitting around me because I was just in a constant state of sweat. So I really felt bad. But in the end, it's like once you get there, we think about kind of, oh man, this was miserable travel. But then you get there and you're able to do work, and you kind of forget about all that because the amount of work and the things that you're able to do, the things you're able to see, it really makes it all worth it.
Right.
If it's like that little bit of struggle for me,
Mhm.
is worth me getting to do and experience this and do the work of, that God's called us to do. So it's
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
and
worth it.
two, to even think about complaining about being able to, not complaining. I mean, yes, the travel is hard. I mean, it's difficult on your body just because it's a lot of hours and there's a significant time difference and all those things. But then you look around when you get there, and there are women who have walked for days to get there, to be there for 3 days.
Yeah.
And it just seems kind of silly to even complain that we had to ride a airplane to get here when that might not be something they can ever even consider, haven't even thought about ever being able to do.
Yeah. I think I've changed my idea on where I want to sit on a plane, though. I used to always like overnight flights. I always thought the window was a good seat because you get to, you got something to lean up against.
Yeah.
But in these new planes, like Josh said, they don't have airflow on those windows, and those windows seats are hot.
Yeah,
and so I want to be in the middle of the plane where I've got that central air flowing, and give me a blanket and I'll be cold. I'd rather be there because those windows seats were hot. But I'm not complaining at all because it was well worth it. And it's it does take something. I understand folks who, especially I've talked to a couple of senior adults who used to do mission trips who've gotten to the point where they're just like, I just can't do that, and I get it. I'm still in my 40s. I'm still young, but still after 8 hours, man, my body is stiff and everything else. And I'm sure them with a lot more age than I have, it gets hard. So it is for us younger folks need to be going. And I'll finish with this from John Adams, who said this last night in our Bible study to college students that, man, if you're at college age or if you're without children at this point, you are ripe to go on a mission trip. You need to use this time for God to go do that because, Josh, you can probably say when you start having children, it gets really difficult to do those kind of things.
Yeah, I think it was, this time is while we were there, my son was playing in his all-star state tournament. So, you kind of, it was, I really didn't think that I was going to have an issue with that at first, but kind of while it was there, you really started going, man, I missed all that. Yeah. But again, like we said, it's worth it. And sometimes we're called to make sacrifices for those things, but absolutely 100% agree with that statement. If you're in college or even if you just have the opportunity to go, you're missing out if you don't go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we've said in the past, if you need help with funding, we'll help you write letters. We'll do things to make sure that we make it where you can go on the trip. We want to send as many missionaries from Calvary as we can on these trips, and Kenya will come back around next year. So we're excited for that. So any final thoughts before we close it out for today? Everybody good? Well, thanks for coming and telling a little bit about the trip. I know we have a lot more, and to the congregation, we'll have another time to share to the congregation. But this was kind of a in the middle of the summer, let's get something out there to talk about the trip. So I appreciate y'all coming and being part of that. And just remember that we'll be back sometime in the future. Me and Pastor Paul back on regular schedule, but we're not sure when that'll be. But just keep looking for Calvary Life, and just remember that we are for God, for Dothan, for the world.